Hello, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order of the Budget Subcommittee of the Pioneer Valley Regional School District. I will do a roll call vote as some of our members are attending remotely.
Melissa Gary Bernardston, present.
And Val here.
David?
David Young, present.
Michelle Jerusa Leiden, present. The first thing on our agenda is citizens' concerns. I am limiting your comments to 3 minutes each for a total of 20 minutes. I ask that you act respectfully. There will be no disparaging words against anyone in this room. And did you have something, Bob?
I just want to be one of the ones recognized to speak, that's all.
Oh, okay. It would be, for time's sake, if you have something new to add to someone's comments, that would be the best way for me and the subcommittee to hear your concerns. For us to just hear the same thing over and over, I think it's just going to take up some time. The other thing is this committee will not respond to your concerns this evening. Oh, and the other thing, can you please state your name clearly and the town that you are from? Thank you. Bob?
I'm Bob Raymond from Bernardston. I'm not here as a I'm not here as a select board member. I'm here as a grandfather and as a concerned parent from Bernardston. I'm here to advocate for the reinstatement of middle school sports program. My understanding, and I'm a little bit old, but in 2019, I know that we had a real low sign up for sports, and it was almost impossible to run 3 teams, meaning the middle school, the JV, and the varsity, and soccer, and in basketball, and I think baseball. Then came the pandemic, and pretty much we've been occupying just JV and varsity. I came to most soccer games last spring, most soccer games this fall, and most basketball games this fall. And our middle school students sat on the bench pretty much. There was as many as 16 kids on the JV basketball team, and most of the 7th and 8th graders got 3 to 5 minutes of playing time. And I think it's up to us as adults. In the beginning, I think the principal told me that he didn't think there was going to be any middle school, any schools that had middle school sports. But I believe in basketball there were at least 5. And I know you have to get a coach, and I know you have to get buses, and I know there's a cost to this. But I think there's a value in sports. It's no different than solving a chemical equation or doing an algebra problem. You have to have kids have skills and physical activity, and you need a coach that knows something to help them out with their developing their skills. So I wish that we would advocate for middle school returning. I think they need their own identity, and I know sometimes that we may not have enough people for middle school, but that's where the athletic director and the coaches can make a decision and say, hey, for this particular sports season, we may only have 2 teams. But right now, we haven't had, with the pandemic, it's just kind of been very difficult to manage having 3 teams each sports season. And I'm talking mostly about the boys, because I'm not sure about the girls. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Heath Cummings. I'm the parent of a freshman here at Pioneer and a resident of Northfield. Closer?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think I was loud enough.
It's for the people at home.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm here primarily tonight to speak in opposition to the administration's decision not to support the startup of a football program this year. This group behind me, a lot of these kids that are in this room right now, and there's a lot of them who weren't able to make it tonight, they have worked extremely hard over the past couple of years. They had this season last year that never was. The administration made some mistakes, and the football team wasn't able to actually field the team because of something that happened that was deemed a mistake. The kids still showed up every day anyways. They were here, they worked out through the summer, through the hot months. I worked with them on strength and conditioning. And then they went out on the fields and they practiced every single day because they were going to sharpen their skills to get ready for the 2022 season, because they were sure and confident with how many kids were there and the information they were getting that they would have the chance to field the team this year. And with what the football committee just put together and the report that was made, the school made the determination that due to money and some other issues, like maybe it was going to take away from other fall sports, if a football program was started up, these kids no longer have the chance to make their dreams come true, to have all that work that they put into this past couple of years to come true. In addition to the time they spend out on the football field, they were out raising money. They were out doing coin drops. They raised thousands of dollars. A bunch of the community people that pulled up and donated tons of money to this potential football team were head over heels happy that a football team was going to be coming back to this community. It's important to this community. It's important to a lot of the people in Northfield. And now it's not going to happen for the decisions that the administration deems are justified. I don't think they're justified. We have a lot of kids here who want to play. I think we have enough numbers that we can field a team. There was actually an effort today to try to get kids to sign up on some sheets to pledge their name if they couldn't be here tonight, and that was thwarted during school. Not sure why, but basically we moved here in 2012 because in 2011 we were looking at towns to move to, and Pioneer was a thriving school with a championship football team. So that's why we are here. And I know that there's a lot of kids who are going to leave this school if there is not a football team. So if this issue is about money, then let's talk the amount of money that the school district loses for every kid that's going to be leaving because there's not going to be football here. And if it is about money, there's also other kids in other school districts who have expressed interest that if Pioneer has a football team, I'm going to school there next year because they don't like where they're going to school, but there's football. And that's what's keeping them there. It's what's keeping them anchored. So if it's about money, that's a huge consideration to take into this whole entire thing. So I know there's a lot of other people in this room who have something to say about this entire thing, but I'll just kind of end with this, that these kids, some of them have dreamed their whole lives to get to this part of their life to actually play this sport. It's huge for them. It's huge for a lot of people. And they've worked really hard to try to make this happen. And the message that we're sending to them by just saying that we have this reason and that reason, no matter how hard you've worked, it's not going to happen. We're basically telling them that you can throw your heart and soul at something, and just because someone else doesn't feel like it's important, your dream's not going to come true. And I think that's a really wrong message to send to these kids who've been extremely dedicated toward making this happen. So hopefully the messages you'll hear tonight can have some sort of sway in reconsidering what this would happen, how this would happen, and how it shakes out.
You've
Okay.
been over for a bit.
All right. Thank you.
Just waiting.
Is there anyone else?
Yeah, just
You
come
can
up.
come up to the, yeah.
All right, I'm Beth Welcome, I'm from Northfield. I will.
I got it.
I got it. Multitasking's my thing. So I'm Beth Welcome from Northfield. I have 5 kids total, 3 are in the district now. I've got 1 coming into the district next year, and then clearly I've got 1 later on. So I've been in the district for a while. I also was a coach for middle school, right out of high school, so I coached soccer. To tag into what he said, middle school is extremely important. It might be the first opportunity that kids come out of elementary school and are able to actually play. Sometimes parents aren't able to get their kids to sports. Maybe their parents aren't interested in sports, and this is their first opportunity. You're asking a kid to go from 6th grade into a varsity or JV level that's never played a sport before. That's impossible. It's impossible to have them go out there and learn the sport for the first time. So we need to get them in a space where it's comfortable in their own level. I think that it's really, really important to what Bob said, that you have to have that level. It's extremely important. And then as far as football, when I was here in Pioneer, football wasn't available. And like these kids, we had the interest, but the school just wouldn't come and make the commitment to it. So I'm seeing it then, I'm also seeing it now. And I'm not really sure why that is a trend for schools to not want to support the football team. We had the exact same amount of kids that went out after and played flag football every day after school to show the commitment that we had when I was in school. These kids did the exact same thing, and it's going without being seen. And I'm just kind of curious as to why that is. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Two of you can come up if you want. If you need two of you, you can come up.
Germán.
Yeah.
So I'm James Stallings from Gill. So hello everyone, and thank you for allowing me to voice my opinions on the administration's decision on the future of Pioneer football. I want to start by saying that I've been playing football alongside Ian and Luke, who's not here tonight, for most of my life. Whether it be for Pioneer or for any other local team, football has been what I have done. By taking away football, you are creating a bigger problem than just having the sport itself. Football is the high school sport, and I guarantee that people would pack the hill on the bleachers to watch us play. Furthermore, many students who love Pioneer have left this school because we didn't offer a program to them. With the already low student population, taking football away is going to drive away far more students than I'm sure you'd expect, which will only worsen the situation here. One of the biggest reasons we want to take away football is because of the cost, and I believe that estimated cost might be a little more than, you might think. Well, it is true that the cost of football is very high. We as a team have raised over $10,000 through the various fundraisers we have done. This means that whatever the estimated cost is could possibly be subtracted by $10,000. This would pay for new helmets, shoulder pads, and would cover some incidental costs as well. Another big reason which was brought to the table was that the team would take away from other fall sports, including volleyball, soccer, cross country, field hockey, and golf. When Pioneer had a varsity middle school football team a few years ago, each of those sports stayed afloat perfectly fine, and the football teams didn't take away from them. We also had a team last year, and each of the sports which were offered were able to have full teams, and so this point to me is invalid. Finally, I would like to speak about the numbers of the team if we are to have one. When me and Ian played in 9th grade, the team began with just 10 players. Before our first game, that number shot up to 15. That same year, the team went 8-0. Even if we field a team with 16 or 17 kids, that doesn't mean that number of kids won't change as the season progresses. It has happened every year I've played and will continue to happen if you allow it to. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope my points validate the continuation of football at Pioneer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more? Two more.
Hi, my name is Ian Simpson, and I'm a student here at Pioneer, and I'm from Northfield. I just want to say a couple words about football and the varsity program. I've been playing football since 3rd grade with lots of my friends, and I've made many connections through football, and I think it has a lot of life lessons to offer, such as leadership and camaraderie. And I think it's just a good opportunity for teenagers, and I think they just need to have that opportunity. And taking away football takes away the opportunity for a lot of kids who don't have that opportunity and are able to use football as an opportunity to do that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And anyone else? One more? Mhm.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Arsenault. I have a daughter at Bernardston Elementary, and I'm one of the football coaches. I've been coaching here for at least 5 years for free. I think using the coaches' salaries as a determining factor as to why we can't have football is not the correct path to go. Both myself and the head coach have spoken about this, and I drive from Westfield. I come here every day. It's not a big deal. I've done it for free for 5 years. Rich is willing to do it for free just to keep this program alive. Because this program will bring kids back to this school. I looked at the declining enrollment numbers, and it's only going to get worse. I don't think taking away football is the right move. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Can I just add one thing?
sure.
I think in general, I mean, I know you're negotiating now, but I take the adverse to that, what the gentleman just said. I think athletics coaches' salaries need to be raised. I mean, I retired from Maher in 2004, and I think my salary in sports was comparable to what coaches are making now. And I know I'm the one that's always yelling about the budget.
You
I'm
are.
always yelling about the budget. But we need to get our kids involved, and they need to learn their skills, and we need men and women who know what's going on to be their leader and model. So, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Judy, do you want to? I want to thank everyone. Now Judy's going to present more of the budget to us.
Sorry, that was me.
Yes.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I'm not responding to any of the comments. James, have you been one of the, what is it? Not narrator, the, what? Yeah, commentator for the basketball games? It's been amazing. So we often stream the basketball games and watch it from home, and it's more exciting than, the Celtics at the beginning of the season. So anyways, I just want to thank you because it's been really fun to watch. So that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, okay. I'll have to listen. Okay, Judy.
Thank you. I think we are
I just need a minute to get.
about ready. Just have to
Oh,
wait for
yeah, we're waiting for Patricia.
Patricia, who's doing a great job of helping us navigate the slides, so thank you, Patricia.
Oh, you're welcome. Are we in the right place?
You are. It's awesome.
New color.
Okay, so tonight, we're going to take a look at some special revenue funds based on some questions that we had sent our way. We're going to take a look at the PVRS budget, athletics, health services, and special needs. So I want to begin by going through some things around the special revenue funds, just to kind of make sure that we're all singing from the same sheet of music, as it were. So the first piece is that under the special legislation, you have a special reserve fund, and the legislation clearly outlines how that fund is to be built up over time. So this first chart just shows that in FY19, what was expected was that the special reserve fund would be at 25% of, no, excuse me, at 0.25% of the whole budget. In FY '20, that number was to be increased so that it would be 0.5% of the prior year's budget. In FY '21, that number was increased yet again to be 0.75% of the prior year's budget. This year, in FY '22, the requirement is that it is at 1% of the prior year's budget. In FY '23, that number increases to 1.5% of the prior year's budget. So there is a significant increase in that line, and I know some of you were asking about that, and that's the reason why, is because the special legislation actually drives that amount of money. So this next chart shows the amounts.
David has his hand raised.
David?
I was wondering, what is the target? And secondly, so what are we moving toward? I always suggest 5%. Secondly, is this fund outside of the general fund, or is this included in our E&D when that calculation's made?
Is actually the way we have discovered it has been accounted for is it's accounted for as a liability within the general fund. So it's not shown as an expenditure or a revenue, it's kind of a liability that's been accounted for, and that's been the past practice that we've discovered with regard to that.
Do you have an opinion on the practice going forward?
I don't off the top of my head, David. I think that that's something that we should discuss with the financial overseer to make sure that we are using best practices with regard to how we account for that balance. So that's something that certainly is on my radar screen to get some clarity from him about. So thank you for raising that. And in terms of the maintenance of the fund, once we hit that 1.5% level of contribution, that's as far as the legislation requires you to go. It requires you to maintain the 1.5 of the prior year's budget moving forward, but it does not require you to add to that percentage. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So this chart just shows the contributions over time and the contribution that is in the FY '23 budget. And as you can see from the years prior to FY '23, you hover between 35,000 and 37,000, or 37 plus a little bit, to get to the various markers and milestones, because again, this is a cumulative number, and you'll see that in a second. This year, the jump is large, and it's because it is a 0.5% larger number in order to get us to that cumulative point. And what you'll see in a couple of slides is that this will be the last year of a big jump in a big contribution like that. So this is sort of the last year in which a large amount of money really needs to be added to it. So if we move on to the next slide, you can see that in FY '22, the balance right now is $143,569 in that account, or that liability, I should say, and that is representative of 1% of the prior year's budget. This upcoming year, we have to hit 1.5 of the current year's budget, and so that makes it $222,769. So that's the large jump. If we take a look at projected into FY '24, assuming that the number that we're looking at right now is the number that's passed, and we understand that we're not there yet, but just using that as an assumption, then the amount that would have to be in that account as of FY '24 would be $228,419. So what does that mean to the contribution moving forward? It means the FY '24 projected contribution will be much, much less, because you will have finally hit that top marker. So this year it's $37,172 to get to the 1%. Next year it's $79,200 to get to the 1.5%. And then the maintenance part begins. And so that's why that contribution is going to be much, much smaller, because you'll be at the 1.5 and just maintaining that as you move forward.
Jane, do you have a question?
Yes, can we have copies of all of those slides?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Jane, I'll put them up on the website right after the meeting. Would you like us to make printed copies?
I want a printed copy.
Sure.
I want to put
Sure.
it in my file.
Sure.
Happy to do that.
Yes. Melissa?
Has the special legislation been posted or emailed out yet?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
posted. I emailed it, and I've
Oh, you did?
posted it to the FY23 Budget
Thank you.
Development webpage. It's in a searchable document.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks.
It is.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll move on. So, again, some questions that were raised were around one-time fund usage for FY '23. So this chart shows two of the funds that will sunset pretty soon and what the spending plan is right at the moment. The numbers we were asked to share with you was what was the total grant amount, what has been expended or encumbered year to date, what we anticipate for FY '23, and what the unexpended or unencumbered balance is after all of that. So ESSER 2 was a $283,544 grant. To date, we have either expended or encumbered $134,728. The anticipated amount for FY '23 is $49,436, which still leaves you with $99,380 yet to be either expended or encumbered in either of the fiscal years. So there's still some wiggle room, certainly in that grant, to go.
When does ESSER 2 expire? 24?
No, I think September 23
Yes.
for ESSER 2.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So that would get you through, you've got 99,000 still to be able to have to expend. ESSER 3, which goes to September of '24, the total grant amount was $614,773. To date, we have set aside $120,000, and that money is the money that's been set aside to do the facilities master plan study and to be able to begin to implement some recommendations from that study. So we anticipate $250,077 would be applied to the FY '23 budget, leaving an unexpended or unencumbered balance of $244,696 to be spent somewhere between now and September of 2024. So then you can see the total amounts of the grants below and the total amount of the unexpended and unencumbered balance. So ESSER 2 in the FY '23 budget as it has been drafted and presented would go towards, in part, mentoring new teachers, and it would also go towards building maintenance. ESSER 3 would go towards behaviors and school psychology positions, and it would also, again, go towards some building maintenance kinds of things. So that's, again, where we stand right now, and certainly if the committee has feedback for us, we'd be happy to hear that feedback. And then there are some other sort of non-grant funding. There are grants that we get that are called entitlement grants from the federal government. Title I is one of those. There's what we call the SPED 240 grant, because that's what the department calls it, but it's the grant for students with special needs, IDEA. We also get Title IV, Title II. Those are all federal entitlement grants. Those are driven by enrollments and other economic factors each year. So I didn't include those in these because they are pretty much, at some level, a guaranteed funding source. These are other sources that tend to be a little more volatile. Circuit breaker is the state funding for extraordinary special education expenses. This year, it's also been extended to allow us to claim transportation expenses in addition to extraordinary expenses. So oftentimes it's used for, as we are planning to do for FY '23, it's used for out-of-district placements because that's an extraordinary special education cost. So we're offsetting some of those out-of-district placements with circuit breaker. We're also offsetting transportation to the amount that we were reimbursed for transportation in circuit breaker for special education as well. School choice, that's revenues that the district receives for incoming school choice students. We're looking at spending $720,000 out of that account as we currently stand in the draft budget. Historically, that has been used to offset some benefits for employees. And if we use all of that $720,000, that would leave us $243,000 in that revolving account to carry over to FY24, plus any other revenues that might come in. Rural aid is a relatively new funding source from the state. It's been designated for small rural schools. At the current stage of the budget, which is only the governor's budget, we hope to see the House version of the budget sometime later this month. Usually it comes out in late March. But the governor's budget right now level funds the amount that the district has received this year. So we're, again, using $116,000 as a place that we can offset some funding from there. The last revolving account is transportation revolving, and that is funded in part by your transportation reimbursement, and other savings that might occur over time. So right now, we're looking at using $191,795 for offsetting the transportation assessment, the transportation costs. So in total, from those funds, we're looking at $1,174,152.
Oh, Melissa, sorry.
If you don't think someone has a question, I probably do. How reliable are these numbers?
Circuit breaker, you spend a year in arrears.
Yeah.
So this is the funding
This
that
is what-
was granted
Okay.
as a result of FY22 that we apply to the FY23 budget. School choice, that's what, your revolving account has a healthy amount in it. It's almost $1 million right now. So again, that $720,000 would leave you with $243,000 in there. So it has been building up over time. Rural aid, again, the governor's budget, which is usually the most conservative of the budgets you get. The legislature, although last year they pretty much lockstepped right across, but the legislature will often add funds, but we use the governor's numbers because, again, that's a conservative estimate. We're not banking on something that may not come to fruition when it's all said and done. Transportation revolving, those are funds that are currently in that account. You can only hold them for so long. You can't hold them forever, so you do have to get them spent down.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I guess we can move on. So there are two revolving funds that we are going to put at rest for the FY23 school year. The first is the athletic gates and receipt and user funds. And the second is the early childhood tuition fund. Both of these funds were victims of the COVID-19 shutdown. So revenues were not collected at any kind of rate that we would normally expect due to remote learning. So they really need a year to recoup and to build back up again, rather than draining them so low, that you don't have anything left. We just felt it was important to just leave those two funds alone. So the result of that is that rural aid is going to pick up the extra cost for athletic transportation that has usually gone into that fund, the revolving account. And then if you remember when we talked about the transition or the shift of a kindergarten classroom to a pre-K classroom at Northfield Elementary School, that we were going to keep that in the budget rather than trying to put that off onto the early childhood revolving account, because we just felt like it was not going to be able to sustain. So those two funds were just, the plan is just to kind of let them rest and build back up in their revenues, so then you have something to pull on in subsequent years.
Do you have those figures when you say low?
Early childhood tuition, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. The athletic gate receipts and user fees is pretty close.
Okay.
There's not much wiggle room in those at all. The early childhood tuition fund is in a little healthier place, but I don't think it's in as healthy a place to be able to sustain that extra pre-K classroom, and that's, so as we worked through the process with Superintendent Kinsella, we just decided that it was best that that classroom, which would normally, if it had stayed a kindergarten, would be in your general fund budget anyway, to leave it there, just in case. And if you remember from that particular presentation, there was some discussion that you may have more kindergartners and not quite so many early, preschoolers, so it gives you that wiggle room to make that shift.
Mhm.
I was trying to look up the accounts.
But, I can get you those numbers.
Oh, I have some.
Okay.
We were looking for revolving fund balances?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, athletics,
Okay.
gates.
Which one?
The gate receipts from athletics
$8,365.
and early childhood.
User fees are a negative. They are currently negative $5,310.
Thank you. I'd forgotten.
Early childhood tuition is a positive. That is $17,292.
Thank you.
Good.
And there's still early childhood tuition to come in. There's obviously athletic user fees still yet to come in. But, again, thank you, Patricia, I had forgotten. Andy's spreadsheet was right there. So, that is why we're trying to be very mindful, because as you can see, the balances are very low.
Yeah.
Transportation that is allocated.
Oh, yeah.
The transportation that's allocated out of the user fees, so $40,000 is encumbered, so that's why it's negative at this point, so.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Melissa?
That was one of my questions, sort of, maybe. Where do the revolving accounts, with the money that is deposited, does that money go directly back into those organizations? So it can't be used for anything else? So
Correct.
what is done in athletics stays in athletics?
Correct.
And what is in, okay.
Yeah,
That's
and what's
what a
done in,
revolving fund is.
school lunch stays in school lunch. What's
Yep.
done for early childhood tuition, I mean, those funds are set up with very specific purposes that the school committee would vote at the time of the establishment of the fund.
Okay.
All right, so now we're on to the individual presentation. So we're going to begin with Pioneer Valley Regional School. Mr. Burke? That's right, you have a mic. Okay.
Good evening.
Hello. What page are we on now, Judy?
Sorry, good question. It should be like page,
It is the page 6, so when you
Page
open
6,
up,
yeah.
it's a top sheet,
Yeah.
and it
Thank
goes
you.
down to, it's 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Backside of the third. We need both.
right, I'll share.
So going off of the slide presentation, the administrative assistant salaries, as you know, the past year, we went from 2 administrative assistants in the main office down to 1, and the guidance administrative assistant was split between the main office and the guidance. So that is where the 1.5 is into one line. For lead teacher, which is actually in the contract, is a teacher leader stipends. That is a reduction of, it's a currently a $1,750 stipend, and there are 4, so that's a $7,000 cost, and so that 4,690 balances out that line item. Teacher salaries is a reduction. Part of that reduction is at the beginning of the year, when we lost Ernest Abramian as our health teacher. We were not able to find a health teacher, but as our .5 art teacher that came in for a middle school, we were able to, she actually was certified in health, and by utilizing her certification in health and paying a staff member to take on another course, we were able to make sure those courses were being run. So at that point, we're basically at the point where we have one extra savings of a salary that we're able to do. And so this basically reflects current positions, and this is not a loss or gain for Pioneer in any way, shape, or form. Special need teacher salaries is a increase. There are 2 IA positions that will be coming in from NES because we have students from the Hive program coming in. So those instructional assistants will be rolling up to Pioneer.
We also, in part of the salary cleanup, realized that there were some people that were attributed to one of the elementary schools that we, really belonged here. So that was part of the salary cleanup that we did. So that's why that's increased.
And the $800 for social studies supplies, this was the only content area that did not have a supply line. Our sciences do, our math department does, our arts, our English, and everyone has a different amount, but this was requested by our social studies teachers, and then looking at it, and in all fairness, putting a $800 social studies supply line will help them and help them deliver their curriculum to our students.
And just so that the subcommittee is aware, we also made that budget neutral. Mr. Burke did reduce some other lines so that $800 would not impact the bottom line.
Yes, thank you. We did, yes. That is not actually an addition, it is budget neutral. Thank you, Judy. Any questions on this part of the budget?
All right. Athletics.
Athletics.
Thank you.
Which is on the bottom of page 7.
Do you want me to continue with athletics, or do we want our athletic director up here, or do you want both of us up here?
Why don't we have Judy with both of you up there? That
Okay.
might work.
So as what was already discussed, the athletic transportation is coming out of, that was coming out of the revolving fund, is coming out of the rural aid funding. So that's why it says no impact on the local budget. The athletic director, as per requested at the beginning of the year, finding someone internally where we were paying $6,500 for an athletic director. Keep in mind, athletic director is easily working a minimum of 20 hours per week, and that's morning, afternoons, and nights. While we were searching for a new athletic director at the beginning of the year, it was very difficult. If you actually look at the salaries, and if you coach 3 sports, you can earn more than the $6,500. So that got increased to, I believe it was 10,500. Or was it 10,000?
10,000.
10,000.
To 10,000, which helped us get Carrie as our athletic director. And once again, it's still a stipend position. in which, was mentioned in citizens' comments earlier that not only coaches, but athletic directors definitely, if we want to continue with our athletic programs at Pioneer, I think it's important to put the funding into those programs.
If I may add, Kevin, as the committee remembers, when the committee approved the change in the athletic director salary for this year, as Kevin said, in the PVREA contract, it's listed as $6,500 if it's someone internal, a faculty member who takes on the position, and that faculty member has a reduced course load. And the way we have that reduced course load is by paying another teacher $3,500 to teach that class. So the actual cost of the athletic director previously in the district was $10,000. It was simply split between two people. And when I researched local athletic director stipends and spoke with districts, many still have it exclusively as a faculty member. The committee felt that taking that $3,500 overload payment and applying that to the athletics director was a budget-neutral way of ensuring that we were able to hire someone.
Regarding coaches' salaries, when we were looking at the budget, currently the budget has been funded for about $95,000 in the past. Looking over the past years, and granted we have had COVID over the past years, the most we have spent, and I believe this was in FY
19, I think.
FY19, we spent about $94,000. And when looking at that past budget, we still had sports that were funded that we didn't have, such as I looked out at past budgets. From what I had seen, there was $6,200 that were going to wrestling coaches. So if we go back to the FY 2021 budget, where we had middle school soccer, middle school football, middle school volleyball, middle school baseball, and middle school basketball for boys and girls, we only spent $81,861. So in being fiscally responsible, moving forward with the sports that we have, we figured we could, as we were asked to by administration, are there places that we could find that we could cut our line items, that we could cut $10,000 that would have no impact on our school, and we can still fund the sports. I also like to point out that, and Carrie and I had sent out a letter the other day. I know there is a sense in the community that we do not want to have middle school sports, and that is not the sense. It's purely what it comes down to is making sure we have the best athletic programs for all our students. And sometimes that requires compromises on both ends. We're still funding the middle school programs. If we can, number-wise, we will make those programs work. I could put out some examples for girls soccer last year, or for girls soccer this year. We had 13 students register as JV players, and we had 9 students register for varsity. You need 11 players just to field a team. That's without a sub. So you look at those numbers, that's 22 students out there. We actually were only able to really field a varsity team. It was definitely not ideal, but we got our students out there, and with our athletic director and our coaches and hard work, we were able to find some JV games for those younger players, and that was still put out there. Is it ideal? Absolutely not, but in a smaller school, we have to find ways that we can service all our students and provide them with an opportunity, and that's what we will continue to do. Currently, right now, how many students do we have registered? I saw it was like in the 40s.
43.
We have 43 students, boys and girls, registered for spring sports currently. Now, granted, that will increase and we'll push forward, but keep in mind, we have to plan. We have to start making, we have to register the games. We have to talk to other teams. So What I would really encourage, and why we sent out another reminder too, is I'd really encourage people to use our family ID system and to register so we can ensure that we have the right programs for all our kids. And that would be really helpful to the athletic director and our coaches.
So is that 43 total? Yes. That's not just middle school?
How many sports is that?
So nothing is being cut out. The 10,000 is just a savings from money that we've never spent, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to get that message out to the people who came here to say that middle school sports were being cut.
But can I'd also like.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Raymond, I totally appreciate your emails. And we were talking about basketball, and you came up to me at the basketball game, and I so appreciate that, and thank you. What? Oh, sorry. So for MIAA, in order to have a team, you have to have 9 kids to field a team. This winter, for 7th and 8th graders, which have been our middle school, we had 7, so we couldn't field a team. For the JV, for the 9th and 10th graders, we had 10 kids sign up. And then for varsity, we had 11, and 5 of them are going to be graduating this year. So the JV is going to be moving up more kids. And basically, that's what it's about, is the number. Girls basketball, they didn't have any seniors at all. They had 4 juniors, 2 sophomores, and 3 freshmen. All the rest were 7th and 8th graders, which is almost half the team. In no way, shape, or form should a 7th grader be playing a varsity sport. It's mental-wise, they're not ready. Physically, they're not ready. And 9 out of 10 of them haven't played before, and they're just kind of thrown out on the field, on the court. So I totally 100% agree with you. And I also wanted to give an example of field hockey. So field hockey, we had 1 senior, 4 juniors, 1 sophomore, 2 freshmen, one of which had never touched a field hockey stick in their life, and 5 7th and 8th graders who also had no experience. So that was an entire varsity team. They had a very creative coach. They knew how to coach. They coached the senior high and the junior high, and they are the only team this fall that went to the state tournament since 2012. So not only is it about numbers, it's about our coaches. And right now, even for the spring, we're still in need of a junior varsity softball coach. March 21st is when the practices begin, when the season begins. So if we don't have a coach, we're not going to have a team. All we'll have is varsity.
Mrs. Baird, I must say, when you describe the success of this year's field hockey team and the creative coach, I'd like to remind everyone, Mrs. Baird was the coach of that team. She brought that young team all the way to the States. Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving forward with the last thing, the athletic supervisor stipends. This is mainly in the fall, and it might actually come back in the spring pending, but we have times where students have absolutely no supervision and they're waiting to play sports, and we need a place for them to be. So we've had some staff members that were willing to supervise these students in the cafeteria or the library while they were doing work between school and when their actual athletic programs begin. That way we don't have students unsupervised in the school, and parents don't have to figure out how to get students off the bus and then right back to school right afterwards. And so that's where that athletic supervisor stipend is from.
Melissa?
Thanks. So I have just a couple comments and questions in regards to some of this. I was recently looking at Arbiter Sports to see what the schedules are looking like. I haven't seen any schedule yet of any middle school Pioneer sports for middle school baseball, middle school softball. Other schools are scheduling those with the notion that if there's not enough kids, the games get canceled. And so I'm curious why, if we're planning on having potentially a middle school baseball, it doesn't look like in the past there's a middle school softball that has happened. When I was looking at coaches' salaries, there hasn't been enough girls one way or the other. So I'm curious about that. So if it's going to be happening, other schools locally have already started the planning process and have schedules made. And there was a pretty robust local middle school soccer and basketball schedule that was out there, including, the neighboring schools. The other thing I would like to say too is being, I was a coach for 12 years, and I don't have a child yet at Pioneer, and so I've never signed up on student ID. And so when I recently heard that when you go onto student ID and you have a choice between JV and varsity and what you're signing up your child for, I've never heard of that. Typically at schools, when you sign up your child, you say, I want them to play volleyball. I want them to play basketball. I want them to play whatever. And then the coaches or the athletic director get together, right? So I would get a roster in the beginning of the season of all the kids who want to sign up. And then they come, they practice, and then we divide, JV, varsity. So with that being said, in watching 7th grade girls and boys get tossed around on that soccer field this fall, if I will be a parent next year with a 7th grade son who will be coming up, and I only see a JV or a varsity option for my 7th grader to play, I'm not going to sign them up. So some of those numbers that you are putting out, I'm curious how many, if you changed it to middle school, we have middle school baseball, and then we have high school baseball. And then when the kids go out and they practice and they try out, then the coach says JV varsity. And then you have those middle school numbers. So I'm skeptical of what those numbers really, truly are with kids signing up, because I think a lot of middle school families did not sign their kid up because they didn't want them to play JV sports.
We actually sent a letter out asking that if your child wanted to play middle school, to please sign up under JV, and that when we got the numbers in, we would look at the numbers, and if there were enough for middle school, then we would do middle school.
I think that was a fantastic response, but that came out yesterday or the day before. That just happened. And part of that is, I would say, because I had heard it within the community and I had brought that forward also, asking questions. Because one of the things I want to understand are how things work. I was going to ask about the, athletic fees, the gate fees. I'm curious, this is a separate question, but do middle schoolers pay athletic fees?
Yes, they do, but they're at a reduced fee.
Okay.
So the middle schoolers pay $60.
Okay.
And the high schoolers pay $90. Unless you get reduced or free lunch, then the fees are reduced as well.
Okay. Did you want to respond to what I said first? I have another question on
Yeah,
fees.
no problem. You asked a bunch of questions. I don't know if I'm going to hit.
I know the
remember
questions,
all of them.
statements, it's fine. Highlighting.
So in Family ID, I am a parent of 2 kids in a regional school. One, both have, one is an 8th grader, one is a junior. And when I sign up for Family ID, it's JV varsity in the high schools. And with other sports, that's the way it is. That's the way it was set up in the past. When I set up the Family ID, when we had no athletic director earlier on, I just went actually off of what was past practice done here. I didn't recreate the wheel. I created the same exact pattern that was done. So obviously there are certain different ways you could approach things.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. But I think the way I have seen it has been that way, not just general high school sports. What were some of your other questions?
Well, it was mostly around, I think it was really around the JV and varsity, that I think the numbers aren't accurate. As in, there's families that could have signed up if it was clear that there was going to be a middle school team. That's all I was identifying. There's really no.
And that could be true. I think part of the problem with registration is Family ID is fairly new to Pioneer.
Right.
We used to have, what were they called, Kathy? Blue sheet?
Blue card.
Blue cards.
Notorious blue card.
Right. And so this was switched actually last year. And I think it's a culture switch for people to realize that signing up and getting people to sign up in a timely fashion helps us in our registration process. And I think that's a culture shift, and that takes time and it takes communication. And we have to continue to do that.
Well, right, communication, and then, if it was clear to families at parent meetings, when there's a winter parent meeting or fall parent meeting, if it was very clear and explicit, and parents knew that as middle school parents, that's the way to, sign up their middle schooler. And then my other, with the athletic, yeah.
Can I just add one thing, and this is more of a personal note?
Yeah.
In my kids' school, they don't even offer middle school sports at all. My daughter played soccer as a 7th and 8th grader on a JV team, playing against girls like from Munson who were twice her size.
Yeah.
I would actually say she's probably a better player because of it. Both my daughters raced downhill varsity from 7th grade. And my other daughter, as an 8th grader, was on the varsity gymnast team at Hampshire, which won Western Mass. So I understand there are also different levels of athletes. There are some athletes that come in with no experience. There are some athletes in the middle schools that come in with a lot of experience, and that definitely provides a range of abilities. There's a range of different sizes. And that's why at the very beginning I said we try to provide an opportunity for all our students throughout the range.
Right. And I think my point to the roster and the Arbiter Sports is locally here, we do have the middle school sports that are the games are being scheduled and they're playing. And so, yeah, depending on where you are and what's available, you go more east and there are certain sports that are more popular and people are doing privatized sports, right? People are having their kid play one sport the entire year. I will say I didn't ever think.
I think we have to get back to the budget.
Okay,
And
so the budget, yes. The
this
one
is-
other question I have about collecting the fees is who's responsible for collecting the fees? Because I've had a parent say that she hasn't had to pay anything all year. And so I'm wondering so if we're in the negative and where athletic fees are, I was curious at who was collecting them and how that happens.
So what had happened was because the middle school fees were $60, a lot of families did not know that. So I just finished going through all of the sports from the fall and giving refunds to all of those people.
Right, but this is a parent who never even had to pay. That their child has been playing all year.
then they should be on a list and it should be collected.
Right, that's why I was asking who's responsible.
I think we better, yeah.
If I may, all of us are interested in ensuring that systems in the district improve.
Yes.
I want us also to support our new administrators.
Yes.
And Kerry Baird stepped in. I think your questions are great, Melissa. And I feel like we need to acknowledge that Kerry stepped in mid-fall. Kevin carried the athletic director work. If he's not trained as an athletic director, and he stepped up for that.
Yep.
Kerry stepped in. There's been quite a bit of tumult in this district about athletics. And I want to be careful that we are providing them public support for the work that they've done, and that we give a new athletics director time to understand our systems, manage our systems, figure out where there are improvements needed. Because athletic directors aren't making a lot of money. And I see Mrs. Baird here all the time. So I want us to be cognizant of, we've got a complicated sports program. We offer an awful lot of teams for a school this size. And while we question, let's also make sure we thank and acknowledge the challenges that Mrs. Baird has stepped into. And I apologize if that's overstepping my role, but I feel like I need to support my staff in public.
Well, and
Thank
my,
you.
and my response to that would be my hesitation, if you noticed, when I said, who's responsible for collecting them? And she said, me. And I was like, okay, well, the reason why I'm asking, right? And so, again, I'm asking to understand because the budget is really important. And so if we are collecting fee, that was my question. So, that is not a fault. You know, I wasn't identifying you specifically.
And just to add on, we are aware, we are looking at who has paid and who hasn't paid, and we are going through that process. But we are definitely behind the 8 ball because of where we started at the beginning of the year. That's probably the most direct answer to your question.
Okay, I think we need to move on with the budget.
I just add one thing. I mean, when you get a 7th grader against a senior or a junior, and that kid can play soccer and dribble around, you know when the kid goes home what he feels like? Now, your daughters may be outstanding athletes. You know, I'm not knocking that. That's wonderful, because there are some 7th graders that can play on varsity teams. But you know how much encouragement it takes at home to try to get this kid to go back to school and do the same damn thing again? It's unbelievable. You know, when you're playing against a Siagalo kid from Hopkins, and you're a 7th grader and he's a senior, I can't believe the kid can, you know, just pick himself up and try to come back and think that they're going to do it again. It just doesn't. I'm sorry.
Well, I think
I think it's time to move on.
you have something else?
Yeah. No.
Oh, okay.
Time to move on.
Yeah, I think these conversations need to continue, but this isn't the place for it. This is the budget. And I don't want to cut anyone off. I think that everyone's opinion is very valid and valued. But there is a lot of work that still needs to be done. And I think some of, how shall I say, I think there's been misinformation out there. And that's why I'm trying to get back to the budget. And I asked the questions that nothing has been cut in the coach's salary, because that was misinformation that got out there. So I just want to get back to that, okay? All right. Thank you
Thank you.
for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I chime in?
Yes, Jane?
I think the educational value of athletics gets lost in the conversation, and I wish it would be remembered.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move along to health services, and that's at the bottom of page 1 of your line item budget. And then Carl is also going to just address one line within the PVRS budget as well. So this is Carla Simpson, our school nurse leader,
Hey, everyone.
and take it away.
Okay, so,
Front page. No, front, very front.
sorry. Shared health supplies, or health services line is pretty straightforward. You can see we have health contracted services. That is basically our MCSR certificates, where we have to register with the state to administer and keep the medications on a property. We also calibrate our audiometers every year, so there's a service for that. Health replacement of equipment, that has to do with our AEDs. So we replace and maintain AEDs on a yearly basis. We see which ones needs to be replaced, and we monitor all that. We replace pads and batteries as needed. And then the shared health supplies line is basically just the supplies and equipment and whatnot for our actual health offices in the 3 schools. So that's all pretty standard. The line that we need to talk about tonight is that new line, which is the district-wide position. What that line up there, the new line represents, is a half-time nurse manager salary. And that is a little background on that. So we, 3 years ago, received a grant, a competitive grant that we wrote as a district nursing team. We received that, it's from the Department of Public Health. It's called a Comprehensive School Health Services Grant. And that's a 10-year, $700,000 grant. So we've now had that for 3 years. Our main goal in writing that grant was to bring health education to the elementary schools. One of the main goals for the Department of Public Health was to give districts money to help them bring nurse managers on board. So two big goals there. So what we did with this money over these last 3 years is we funded the nurse manager position. And we also piloted a health education program at our elementary schools, which is up and running right now. We purchased a really great curriculum called The Great Body Shop. Health education is something that's been missing in the district at that level. Our wellness policy states that we do that from pre-K to 12, and that is correct. At 7 to 12, we do have health education. There's a couple gaps. I think an 8th grade rotation is missing right now. But at the elementary schools, we have not been providing health education. It just hasn't been happening. Since, I think, long ago, Julie, you probably remember, our kids had a health educator, I think, when they were maybe in 1st or 2nd grade, and they're about to turn 20. So that's...
20 today.
Yes, right today. So that's quite some time that we haven't been providing health education, and particularly nutrition education. I think COVID really pointed out the importance of that. So I mention all this because the stipulation to keep this grant is that after 3 years, the districts absorb that nurse manager salary. So that's what will allow us to keep that grant, is if that salary goes into the general fund. And keeping that salary in the general fund will allow us to continue to receive $70,000 per year for the next 7 years. And it's a lot of extra money it gives us, because it kind of, for example, last year we needed a new AED in the district. It's about a $2,000 machine. We were able to use grant funds to replace that, so we could free up money in shared health supplies to be able to purchase PPE, which was required for COVID. We also use this grant to offset the general fund and provide professional funds for all nurses. What are some of the other wonderful things we've done with this? The curriculum, we purchased a curriculum, The Great Body Shop. We have done some really cool upgrades in our health offices. We have, for example, if we need a new recovery couch in one of the offices, I think NES needed one last year. Again, that's about a $600 piece of equipment. We were able to purchase it with grant money. So lots of other things have happened with this money, but I'm encouraging everyone to accept this into the budget so that we can carry on with having this extra money. Does anyone have questions on that?
Good job.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I have a quick question, Yeah. but I think it's more general. Do we have a grant writer for the district?
Ariel LaRoe is the curriculum coordinator and grants manager. So she writes the entitlement grants, and she takes a look at competitive grants. We don't have a separate person who's
We don't have
dedicated.
someone who like, okay.
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank
Right.
you.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
everyone.
So just a couple of other things around that, you know, as Carla was talking about the lines, the $5,900 that's budgeted for health supplies for this year, the split of those costs is budget neutral. So it's not additional funding. It's just that when we looked at it, it was sort of a catch-all for a lot of different kinds of things. So for example, when we report at the end of the year to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we need to report contracted services as that category of expense versus a supply expense. So doing this just allows us to make sure that the coding is there so that when the end of the year report gets done, that the costs are captured correctly. So that's why we wanted to take care of that particular piece. On to special needs.
Hi, I'm Christy Fontaine. I'm the Special Education Administrator for the district. So our first line up on our first slide is an increase of, to support additional teachers for summer programming for our special ed students.
And I'm just going to interrupt for a quick second because I forgot to point people in the right direction. And we are looking at page 9 of your handout.
The very last
Of the line item budget. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be the navigator, and I forgot.
Okay. We're also seeing an increase for a teacher at Pioneer. That is to support students and create a social emotional behavioral program here at Pioneer. We have some students who are moving up from the elementary level, and there currently is not a program to continue that support for those students. The inclusion specialist reduction is, we haven't had that role in the district in several years, so we are offsetting that, just switching it over to a different role. The speech increase is reflective of a change in personnel. We had a new speech pathologist turnover at one of our elementary schools earlier this year, and that will be reflected next year. Certified occupational therapy assistant, and looking at our students and their needs, up until this year we had only a 0.9 occupational therapist, which when we lost our previous school psychologist, occupational therapist earlier this year, we hired a 1.0 based on the needs that we have of the students. And after further reflection and really kind of taking a deep dive and looking at our OT services and the amount of evaluations that we're doing and working with kiddos and attending IEP meetings, we really determined that there is a need for a half-time occupational therapy assistant who will be supervised by our current occupational therapist. So that will be part-time. School psychologists, we are hoping still to fill the vacant position that we have, as well as adding a behaviorist to support the social emotional needs of our students, which we've seen since the pandemic, a real increase in the needs.
That was negative.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it's a
That
negative
shows a
number. 'cause
negative.
we're
That's
gonna
why I'm
offset-
concerned.
Yeah, we're going to
Sorry, we're
offset
gonna-
that with ESSER 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
I missed that piece there. Yes, we're going to be offsetting that with ESSER 3 funds.
The school psychologist?
Yes.
The behaviorist.
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
and the
you know what?
and the
I can
and the
look right
behaviorist.
here.
Yeah,
I
yep.
keep forgetting. All right, thank you.
Yes, and we have a need for a registered nurse to support a student at Pioneer here who is medically fragile and in need of full-time nursing support when she's in school. The next slide.
Yeah, and just a note about the one-to-one nurses, it's actually, that line is for 2 nurses, and if you remember, there was a reduction at Bernardston Elementary School in the nursing line because the position is moving with the student.
Okay.
Okay, so we have an increase in a supply line for speech pathology, teaching and computers. That is to help to support the development of the program, the Hive program at Pioneer, and additional teaching supplies for our teachers. Special assessments, elementary and Pioneer, we have an increase there. Those are for our independent evaluations or any additional evaluations that need to be done outside of the program. They're approximately anywhere between $2,000 and $2,500 a piece usually. So we just, based on our data, we are requesting that. Elementary other expenses, it's related to extra services at each school. Shared travel, that's an increase just to make sure that our related service providers and staff who are traveling between all of the schools are able to get reimbursed for their mileage. And contracted services, right now we have assessments that need to be conducted by a licensed psychologist in addition to those that are done in the district. So $55,000 that will be offset by the 240 grant, our special ed entitlement grant.
Yep, and there are other contracted services that come to light in terms of students' particular needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that line covers those contracted services as they're required.
Right.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Could I ask, what percentage of our district needs your assistance? You know, just
Have
roughly.
to do some quick math. Roughly, probably about 25%.
And let me ask you this, if a kid gets into real trouble mentally during the day, is there somebody immediately available?
Yes.
That the student can go to and talk to somebody?
Yes, we have school adjustment counselors in each building, as well as here at Pioneer, we have 2 school counselors who are available to address any behavioral needs. We also have a contracted behavior tech who is available for those students who might be having some behavioral dysregulation, as well as we have staff trained in each of the buildings who can respond at a moment's notice to support students who are having behavioral difficulty.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Moving on to tuitions.
All right.
Oh, there it goes.
Patricia's driving.
Oh,
that screen.
Patricia,
Sorry.
sorry. No, that's okay. I was looking at her screen. Elementary tuition and local district, that is meeting potential needs of students based on outcomes of assessments and IEP meetings. The potential for a student who might need something more than what we have to offer in the district and might need an out-of-district placement. Pioneer tuition and local district, that is a student who is going to be moving up from elementary to middle school to the secondary level. Out-of-state tuition, that is a reduction because the student who currently attends a school out of state, just across the border in Vermont, is she's going to be aging out, so that will be a reduction there. Elementary private tuition increase in the all funds budget, offset by circuit breaker due to a possible change in placement for a student, and the PVRS private tuition rate is an increase in the all funds budget, which will be offset by circuit breaker.
So those last few things just reflect change in placement or change in location, or age group, I should say, age range.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll entertain any questions or feedback that the subcommittee may have, because we have a meeting on Thursday night that if you have some feedback that we need to incorporate into the public budget hearing, we want to make sure that we do that.
Do you have any updates for Thursday? for our public hearing?
No.
Okay. All right, so I don't think,
Jane might have something.
oh, Jane, I didn't see you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I see legal advertising for other districts for their hearing, and I have not seen one for us. Are they just doing something nice, or haven't we done it yet?
I don't know.
Do you mean something in the paper? I thought that Joanne had done that. I will check.
I may have just missed it.
I know that Joanne knows she has to do it, so let me check and I will get back to you.
I would hate to think that the entire community did not know that this was happening.
Right.
I do know, Jane, that it's posted on the website. I just saw it when I was looking for the agenda for tonight's meeting, but yeah, Patricia will follow
But
up.
I question how many of the public look at the website. I think we need to advertise more than on our own website, but it's kind of like talking to ourselves.
Sure, I get that. Yep, and there is a process for that. We'll make sure it's followed.
I thought the school committee, though, voted for the official posting as the website. That was several years ago.
I do know that Joanne sends them, though, on a distribution list to the town halls. And
Yeah.
so, in addition to the website, that's her practice. But as
Yeah,
far as
but-
the newspaper's concerned,
Yeah, she's talking legal in the
Yep.
newspaper.
I'll check with Joanne tomorrow morning and let people know.
We're doing that anymore.
You don't have to let me know.
Oh.
You don't have to call me.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Judy. I guess, are there any other questions? David still there? No? No one from at home? All right, we'll see you on Thursday then.
All right, thank you.
Exact same time as last week, I think.
But in the auditorium.
Oh,
The auditorium, and
in
it's a
the
budget
auditorium.
hearing, so it's a different setup,
yeah,
and the public
Okay.
may comment at different points throughout the meeting.
yeah,
There will be 2 microphones set up.
yeah.
that is
All right.
actually a public hearing and not a school committee meeting. Yep.
Right.
That's this
Yeah.
We're going to adjourn.
Do you have a
You want a
motion? Yeah.
motion? Want to make a motion
You
to
want to make a
adjourn there, Jim?
motion to adjourn? Okay.
I make a motion.
All right.
I second that.
Okay. Roll call.
Melissa Gary, Bernardston, yes.
Jim Bell, yes.
David said yes, although we couldn't hear him. Thanks, Dave. I saw you say yes. And Michelle Drew, so Leiden, yes.